At the age of 7, I had trouble learning how to tell time on an analog clock. I was not a fast learner in my elementary years, and I was only able to tell time on those clocks based on my memory of what certain times looked like, rather than mastering the code of big hand location plus small hand location equals answer. For example, I was able to easily remember that when both hands stood straight up, it was 12 o'clock. But if it was an obscure time like 7:26, I'd be clueless. In my father's brutish frustration at my inability, he placed me in the center of my bedroom, telling me to stand there and stare at the small off-white analog alarm clock on the edge of my dresser. I would not be allowed to leave my room until I was able to report the proper time. I ended up waiting about 45 minutes in that position until the clock read a time I recognized and was able to satisfy my father's request. As you can imagine, I left the room no smarter than when I'd entered, and my teacher's use of a paper plate with movable construction paper hands was a much more effective method. Laws, threats, and punishments make up the intangible legislative system that modern society has constructed to function in as civil a manner as possible. The trouble with all of them is that none of them work. No law that forbids an act has ever ended the act, nor have punishments adequately deterred people from committing crimes and misdemeanors. The government, for all its good intentions, will find itself eternally frustrated as it fails to mold society using those tools. They're as effective as trying to beat children so they'll learn it's wrong to hit one another, or trying to lock a child in his room, refusing to let him out until he learns a particular skill. As a society, we can't use such methods as our primary structure for civilization and allow ourselves to be surprised when people remain uncivilized. Most people's resistance to kill fellow humans isn't motivated by the law. They tend to not kill each other because they realize the weight of the many negative consequences associated with doing so, and a legal punishment is only a sliver of that consequence pie. Because it's only a sliver, most people are certainly willing to break the law as long as they can deal with the rest of the pie, namely regret, multiple degrees of guilt, basic empathy, and the known risk of harming one's own species or fellow civilian who could have some way contributed to the betterment of the killer's own society, all of which may well be permanent. Now, if a person can deal with those consequences, the threat of the law is not a strong deterrent. The threat of laws and their punishment merely shows civilians that whomever has the power to make those laws is above them and is thereby worthy of contempt. Whomever has the duty to enforce the laws is in a position of exemption or hypocrisy, and is thereby a figure to distrust, resist, and avoid, more than to obey, especially for a citizen who has already justified the illegal decision or decisions through his or her own moral code. If someone has made the decision on his or her own grounds, the law is not a second barrier to stop them. It's just something that reminds them not to get caught. The majority of criminals consider punishment a calculated risk rather than a guaranteed result anyway. If they knew there was a guaranteed fair and civil enforcement of the law, there would be far less crime. Would your highway driving habits change if you knew for a fact that you'd have a $100 ticket to pay 100% of the times that you broke the speed limit? Of course, no such perfect system does or can exist without infringing on too many civil liberties to be justified. Look no farther than the joke that was prohibition of alcohol in the USA between 1917 and 1920, or the prohibition of marijuana here now. Misdemeanors are considered worthy risks, and with no personal moral conflicts, people continue drinking then just as they continue smoking now. And the law can do no more to stop people from using substances than what my bedroom walls could do to teach me how to tell time. Therein lies the magic bullet to elevate society to a new level of safety and civility. We can't force people into tolerating differences and obeying laws, even if we know those laws would benefit society as a whole. The solution is to teach them. Rather than banning burqas, we need to teach gender equality and grant women control over their own wardrobes. Rather than prohibiting drugs and alcohol, we must regulate them responsibly and inform the adult consuming populace of the risks and benefits, leaving them to make their own informed decisions. Rather than flooding roads with traffic police, we need stricter driving training programs that don't release a driver until they've been tested in multiple elements and truly understand the risks and responsibilities involved while controlling a high-speed box of steel on a narrow surface filled with hundreds of others moving in different directions. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. There is no internal problem with our species that education is not both a prevention against and a cure for. It's too bad the world's most influential countries have thrown in with military zeal instead, probably in favor of the immediate short-term results. In terms of overall efficiency and efficacy, however, colleges are cheaper than jails and books are cheaper than bombs.